All right, everybody. We are back for another amazing interview today. I'm so excited. I've got Ralph joining me here from Help for Men. He is the author of The Dead Bedroom Fix, which for people in my world, it's actually really funny. I think like No More Mr. Nice Guy is like the top book that everybody knows about, but I would say The Dead Bedroom Fix is definitely getting up there. Like in terms of just people in my world knowing about it, knowing like the absolute like benefit of reading this book and really bringing it into our lives. So I'm really excited to have you here, talk more about the book, but really talk about all of the work that you're up to and the stamp that you're putting on men's work in general. So Ralph, thanks so much for making the time today and for joining me here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And what an intro. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything that you want to just share about yourself briefly with the audience, about
Sure.
where you're at in the world or like even like the pathway that's led you to the work
Yeah.
that you're doing now?
Yeah, real quick, my story, if you will, is that about 12 years ago, I went through a divorce that involved infidelity from my ex. We had three kids. The youngest one was a year and a half old. It was very, very stressful time in my life. I did the therapy thing. I did the extreme anxiety weight loss thing. I did the, going back to the gym thing. I did all of that stuff. And part of my therapy basically was my own therapy. This wasn't prescribed to me necessarily, was to write. And so I would blog and write about my life and all these things going on. Of course, nobody read the thing because there's billions of blogs out there. But I happened to find that the URL of Dad Starting Over was available, so I ran with that and wrote for a while on that. And the only thing really that got any attention from I wrote about being a parent and budgeting and health and infidelity and all that other stuff. Infidelity got some views, but what got most views was the concept or the topic rather of sex and marriage because sex sells. And so a couple individuals said, I really like this article about this. You should write a book on it. So I did. And that book became The Dead Bedroom Fix. And the first edition of that book came out 2017, the second edition in 2020, and then the third edition just came out last month, July of 2024. So if you do a search on Amazon or whatever, make sure you're seeing the third edition and not previous editions of it. And it's on Audible and everywhere else. And it's done, as you mentioned, it's done very, very well, surprisingly. Knock on wood. I've sold hundreds of thousands of copies of it as a self-published book. That's a pretty good thing, for any book rather. So I'm blessed to have been able to touch and reach a lot of men from all over the world. And because
Yes.
of that book, that allowed me to branch out and do other things such as create a men's group, do the coaching thing, myself and five other gentlemen on our team. And then here recently in the past few weeks or past few months, rather, we've created this other brand, which is much more inclusive. It was under Dad Starting Over for a while. And now we have this much more inclusive brand called Help for Men, which has allowed us to reach a lot of men that aren't necessarily dads. They're not necessarily starting over, which usually has the connotation of divorce with most people. And it's done very well for us. We're already getting some mainstream press attention that Dad Starting Over may not necessarily have. I told you before we started here, I just did an interview with New York Magazine, for goodness sakes. So that's pretty cool. So things are looking good for us.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's so many great pieces that you're speaking to in terms of like, there's even a conversation we could have about like that journey of like, just starting out with the writing and get initially like sort of getting the crickets, so to speak. But like it's really neat what you're speaking to because this sort of journey, and what men were asking for, it sort of naturally got created. Like that was
Yeah.
the natural interest that came out of this. And then now look at what's been created from that. It's so cool.
Yeah, if there's any key to my success, if you will, it's luck. I was thrown into the deep end of the pool with what I did in with what happened to me. But it was also, I'm one of those that when I see an opportunity, I just jump on it real quick.
Mm,
So when somebody says you should write a book, I go, oh, I've never done that before. I've always thought about writing a book. What do I write a book about? Well, here you go. Here's the subject. And boom, I took off with it and ran with it. And, it's
so
not a
cool.
home run every time somebody says you should
Yeah.
do. A lot of misses, a lot of thousands of dollars
Mhm.
wasted on stuff that went nowhere. But there's a lot of learning along the way. And you eventually get to where you're going, hopefully. But I think what I've seen for a lot of men is they don't do that first step. They're just stuck in, one of these days. And it never comes.
Yes.
And years go by and they just keep saying one of these days, one of these days.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's definitely, not necessarily like the pathway that I was thinking of in this conversation, but what a great even topic in that, right? Because I think in this sort of modern era that we're in, it really requires us to be like adaptable, really being able to like take action and move quickly. And again, it's not every situation that's like that, but that's what I really hear in what you're speaking to is like you see an idea, you test it out, you run with it, which really that sort of decisiveness, that ability to make decisions in the moment, I think it really translates to all other areas of life as well, including our marriages or how we're parenting or that type of thing.
Absolutely. And on the business side of things, the cost, the barrier to entry for a lot of business related ideas, money making ideas is pretty low these days. Thanks
Hmm.
to the internet and a lot of digital things, you don't have to like go mortgage your home or go to the bank and borrow half
Yes.
million dollars for building some brick and mortar thing, whatever. You can literally sit in your bedroom with a laptop and come up with something and keep coming up with more and more things until somebody buys something. And that's very, very attractive to a lot of guys. And a lot of guys, a lot of you out there listening to this, you're sitting on an idea, something that is big that could potentially reach thousands and thousands of people. It won't make you rich overnight, but it could, help pay the bills or whatever. And you're just saying, one of these days I'll get around to it. And if, like I say,
Absolutely.
if there's any secret to my success, it was jumping on it and keep jumping on it, whatever
And
opportunities
moving.
came up.
For sure, for sure. And so, one of the things that I'm curious about is, you talked about sort of this evolution from dad starting over, focusing on married men and sort of the relationship dynamics there. What were you seeing out in the world that led sort of that next evolution of, okay, I'm going to start looking at, expanding out, creating this sort of more, I'm going to use the word inclusive, but really this open opportunity for men of all, whether you're
Mhm.
married or you're single, that help for men, like what led to like that pathway being created?
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily me sitting back and watching like the overall atmosphere change or whatever. It was basically very um specific moments of people saying, "I really like your material. I really like this stuff. I really like this book and stuff. I would join your group, but I'm not a dad. I'm not starting
Mm,
over." And anytime, business 101, if you have to kind of explain things to people, if it's confusing to them, if they hesitate because of, then your initial message is not right. I shouldn't have
right,
to go, no, no, you don't understand. We have more than just dads. No, you don't.
right.
It's not just for divorce. We all said I shouldn't have to do that. I need to break down those barriers to get more guys in. And we've had guys that are like, I know a dude. I gave him your information. I gave him the book, and he saw it and immediately went, "Ugh, no, that
Mm,
ain't for me, dude." And the guy's like,
hmm.
"No, this is exactly for you. This the situation you're going through with your wife or your
Yes,
divorce. This is for you." Nah, that ain't me. And it was the brand was a little it still is a little off-putting to some people.
mm,
There is a lot of pushback on some kind of hyper masculine type of stuff. Like a lot of guys are a little bit more sensitive, and there's like that doesn't really appeal to me. I'm not a weightlifter guy. I'm not,
sure,
the logo with dad starting over is a little cartoon character, and he's musky, looks like a superhero guy, and they're like, that ain't me. And so we don't
yes,
want to lose those guys. Their perspective is valuable. So we want to bring them in
absolutely.
and have a more inclusive brand.
Well, and it's funny that you say that too, because like when I just listened to the audiobook this week, in preparation for an interview, and like, it's like if we were to look at the continuum of men's work out there right now, if you were to look at like the red pill movement or the stuff on sort of that far end of the continuum, the dead bedroom fix is definitely not there. It's really like, yes, there is a place of sort of like rigor and, let's call it like courage, like the courage of a man to step into that way of being. But I mean, there's so many things that you talk about in the book in terms of like understanding, like, hey, like, this is not the 1950s anymore. Your wife is likely going to be working, those types of things. So I just, more so what I was speaking to is like, I find that really interesting that, yeah, like, even just that recognition that like the where the book is at can even be off-putting for a certain audience of men, and sometimes like that's just going to happen,
Yeah.
but I also I really respect that you're speaking to of like creating a community that is as inclusive as possible, really
Yeah.
even like finding the pathways to support those men.
And as I said in my book, that some of the stuff in there, some people go, this is the antithetical to who I've been all these years. And I say, I'm not telling you to change who you are, dude.
Yes.
And I put in there the book that I'm the type of guy who loves like little animals and puppy dogs and cats and babies. And that's just me. I love art and music and all those other kinds of things. And I'm not going to just set that aside because it's not manly. It's not masculine. That's not going to get me laid or whatever. No, that's stupid. It's still being authentic to yourself, but recognizing there may be some little tweaks here and there that you need to do to be a more holistically attractive human being.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so great. So I want to come back to the book and just speak to, some of the questions I have, and then also some of the questions that men, I did a survey and sort of asked some of the guys in my own men's group. So one of the things that I love that you spoke to, and is probably like the most challenging place for me, is like, um, you really like the foundation of like, hey, in my life, you know, I'm a dad. I have a wife, I have a job, I have these things, but yet, like, I'm able to take care of the chores, work out, have, my hobbies, go on date nights, that type of thing. And one of the things that sort of showed up for me in that was like, how do you design your life in such a way that you can show up powerfully in all those areas? Because like, I'll even say for myself, sometimes it feels like a bit of a struggle. Like maybe like I'm working out consistently right now. I do my job, I do my job well. I spend time with my family, but there's still areas, right? Like there's still
Sure.
maybe stuff around the house that needs to be taken care of that gets pushed off. And so like, how do you sort of structure your life to really show up powerfully, in my long-winded way of getting to that
Oh, yeah,
question?
or can you? Or are you being not fair to yourself? I mean, you're a human being for
Sure.
God's sakes. You only have so many hours in the day and so much energy.
Yeah.
It's how often I'm telling guys more and more, give yourself a damn break, dude. Like, look at everything
Hmm.
you have. Like, some guys are like, I've lost 60 pounds, and I'm like, hallelujah, that's amazing. Yeah, but I've, not making, I'm making $5,000 less than what I did last year. Yada yada. I got to push harder. That's great. The energy's great, but at some point you have to go take a step back and say, overall, I'm doing pretty well.
Hmm.
And if it helps to kind of masculinize the whole thing, let me compare myself to the rest of the male population. Oh, I'm doing really, really well.
Sure.
I'm doing okay. So you're gonna fall down at some
Mm.
parts. I mean, I'm getting older. I'm going to turn 50 years old next year. I'm going to, my energy is way down compared to what it was 10 years ago. I can tell you that right now. I'll look at, maybe little video clips of myself and stuff. I'm like, I am not the same dude. And
Hmm.
I have to give myself a little bit of a break, and like
Right.
the simplest form of this is going to the gym and working out. Been kind of a gym rat for the majority of my life, off and on, especially post divorce, been very much back into that. And I'm paying for it now as we speak. As I
Hmm.
sit here, this shoulder is it's not good. And this
Hmm.
elbow is not good. And I would love to, try and get 315 pounds on the bench press and all these other things, but that's done, dude. It's over.
Right.
And I could sit here and beat myself up over it. And there's some other 50-year-olds that are listening to me going, dude, 315 is nothing, man. I do 405. That's fine. God bless
Right.
you, whatever. But that ain't me. My body's telling me, please stop doing that. You're killing yourself. And I don't know what's going to happen with this shoulder and this elbow, if it's surgery down the line or whatever it may be, but it ain't good. And I had to give myself a break. I'm still hitting the gym. I'm going lighter
Right.
on the weights. I'm still going through the motions, doing what I can. I'm still hitting the treadmill. That's a micro example of you're doing okay, dude. You're still putting in the effort. You can't be perfect. None of us can be perfect.
Absolutely. Yeah, and definitely like hear that sort of that aspect of grace, like really like allowing ourselves to have that. So there's sort of two parts that it opens up. The one side is, okay, so but what about for the man who's like, you know what, Ralph, I can't do the chores in the house, or I just can't make time for date nights. Like they're using time as sort of the barrier to, show up in their lives. Where are some ways that you sort of see to support that man?
I think it's really huge is other men in your life, the value of a men's group, the
Hmm.
value of a tribe of dudes, your posse, other guys around you to kind of elbow you and tell you like get to it, mister. I
Yeah.
think it's invaluable. Unfortunately, what we see, I mean, if I'm thinking about my own little social circle outside of the help for men world. Do I have other men in that my real life world that do that? Probably not.
Right.
It's when we get together, it's with a beer in hand watching the football game or something like that. It does. So you need some type of outside influence, and some of us rely on our spouse or partner to do that, which, as
Hmm.
we've learned over the years, is not the greatest thing in the world to have a woman going, "Hey, dumbass, get off your butt. Let's, you got stuff to do." We go,
Totally.
"Oh, shoot, my bad. I'm sorry. I got distracted with stuff or whatever."
Hmm.
So discipline, 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 regiment in your life. Um, so we have a lot of guys, as you probably know, within our world that have what we call fall under the category of neurodivergent. So that includes like
Hmm.
ADHD and so forth. They really need to regiment their life. They really need to
Yes.
use that Google Task app, which I use all the time, the calendar and so forth to keep things straight. And it may be as simple as every Wednesday you put on there, do dishes or
Right.
whatever. I don't know about you, but I do dishes every day, trash
Yeah.
every day. What else is every laundry every day? Because all the kids and everything else. So put it on your calendar every day. If that's your
Right.
thing, put it on there. Do it. It's discipline. It's making it regimented. It's having people around you that aren't afraid to say, "Get to it, buddy." Sometimes that may be your spouse, sometimes not. But I mean, what else can you do? We're not
Hmm.
superheroes. We need a little nudge every now and then.
Yeah, when it's a great point, and I think it's like it's so easy to make it that like your schedule or your task list is like basic. I can see how like it's so much a part of my world now that like I don't give it the credit that it's actually like due for, because you're right, because there's plenty of conversations that I've been in with men where it's like they're so scattered and frantic with their schedules, they forget things, and it's like, oh man, like these tools, they're there. Like they're there to be used, and once you kind of put them into practice and use them more and more, it's a huge benefit in our lives. So I mean, I really
Yeah.
appreciate you speaking to like, yeah, it can be that like really, hey, if you're finding that like you're not doing the dishes, or you say you're going to put your laundry away and you don't do it, put it on the calendar, create that time for it.
And keeping with the time thing, there's a lot of books written on this topic. Keep track of your time. Have
Hmm.
a little notebook next to you, and you'd be surprised, men and women alike, how much of our day is taken up by just nonsense that we
Oh
do not
yes.
need to do. Like, be very religious about it. So when you get distracted by that YouTube video, write it down. 15 minutes. I got distracted by this YouTube video that somebody sent me.
Mm,
When you get up and make a cup of coffee, you write that down, and you realize I got 3 hours of nonsense on my day,
yeah,
and here I am, complaining about not having time for fill in the blank. What am I doing? And
totally.
be honest with yourself. And the regimenting is one thing, but being honest is a whole other ball of wax there.
Absolutely, right? And just um, and I could see some guys sort of like guilting themselves, like, oh hey, I wasted 3 hours today, like I'm a loser kind of thing. And it's like, but that's the starting point, right? Of just really like, separate the emotion from the fact,
Mhm.
like this is where you get to work from in like, hey, okay, you started at 3 hours, can you start to sort of whittle that down? So yeah, that's awesome. um, I want to shift into just some questions around like male female dynamics that you spoke to in the book. And so I'm really curious about this question because, and you speak to it in the audiobook at the end as well, about like, hey, when should a man decide to whether stay or leave the relationship? And so just one of the things that I'll share is that like in a lot of men's work I see out in the world, there's sort of just like this continual sort of statement of like, as the man, you're responsible for your relationship, your marriage. You got to do the work to save the relationship and marriage. And oftentimes what it is all about the man. And I think that there's definitely a place where it's like, yeah, if you've not been showing up in your marriage or relationship, you're going to have to really do that work. But what ends up happening is that there's a lot of guys who are doing the work. They're really trying to shift the dynamics of the relationship, and they're finding that like, hey, their partner is not meeting them there. Their partner is not being accountable for their side of the street, so to speak. So like, how do you approach that to sort of create that conversation for a man really to be like, be responsible for his life, but also help support him to create, I don't think this is necessarily the way I want to say it, but like really sort of, let's call it, bring them both in back into partnership?
You
Let's go
know,
from there.
it's interesting. What we have working against us in this is that my material and other people's material like it um, is very attractive to a subset of men who are what we call, for lack of a better term, kind of anxious in nature.
Hmm.
And sometimes that anxious in nature stuff can go a little too far into what we call codependent behavior.
Hmm.
I absolutely need her. I need her to need me, and all that nastiness that goes with it. So this sounds kind of nefarious, but a lot of these groups and stuff are out to get your money, and some of these
Hmm.
groups charge thousands and thousands of dollars. I've learned over the years, like, I'm leaving a lot of money on the table. I've learned,
Yes. Yeah.
but some of these groups really take advantage of these guys.
Hmm.
And what a lot of these guys want to hear is, "You're at fault. It's all you, buddy. Just pay me $4,999 and I'll tell you how to fix it." And these guys are like, "Here you go. Here you go. What do
Hmm.
I got to do?" And they'll go to the camps and they'll have a guy yelling at them, tell them that they're a loser, and they'll come home and not a whole lot has changed.
Yes.
But that appeals a great deal to the fixer mentality of your typical dude, which is amplified a bazillion fold by a very codependent mindset in a lot of men, which is, "I'm worthless. I'm filled with shame. I'm a terrible human being. I'm responsible for all the pain that I see around me." And a lot of the times, guys, you're at fault for sure. Using the pie chart analogy, a big chunk of the pie,
Hmm.
it's a lot of what you're doing. But a lot of it is also her. A lot of it is also just the unfortunate circumstance you find yourself in, whatever it may be. It
Yes.
takes two to tango. She's an adult. And yes, she brings a lot of baggage to the table, much like you do. So if I have a guy, for example, who comes to me and says, and this has happened, "I've caught my wife 5 separate times in 5 different affairs." What are you doing, dude? Like,
Yes.
the writing's on the wall. This gal's got a problem.
Yes.
It's not your fault necessarily. It's not, if you want to be, if it helps soften the blow, it's not necessarily her fault either. She is just a broken little girl acting out a lot of broken little girl stuff. The key
Hmm.
though is, dude, you don't have to be along for this ride.
Yeah.
Nothing says you have to be there. In fact, nobody should be. This gal is not wired to be in a relationship with anybody. She's got a lot of work to do on herself. You need to clear the table of this gal and get her out of there. Well,
Hmm.
some of these guys tell me, "Well, here's the deal. I've been working with a therapist. I've been working with this other men's group. I've been working with whatever." And the consensus with all of them is, "No, dude, you got problems. And if you
Right.
would,
Yeah.
just man up," there's the term. It really gets a lot of men. "Or if you would just get your head out of your butt, all of this would be fixed."
Yes.
And I'm telling you, for a lot of you guys, that's complete and total BS.
Hmm.
Brings a lot of nonsense to the table. Yes, she's a human being. She's capable of some terrible, awful stuff. It's like, I like to use a lot of analogies, metaphors, so forth. Putting on a suit of raw meat and then walking into a tiger cage and getting mauled and just be like,
Hmm.
"Man, it's what is going on here?" It's like, "Dude, what are you doing?" "No,
Yeah.
no, no. Let me go out here. I'll go to the hospital, fix my wounds. I'll try it again tomorrow. I'm sure it's something I'm doing wrong." Sometimes there's this phrase, Occam's razor. Sometimes the simplest solution is the correct one. And the
Hmm.
simplest solution for a lot of these guys is, you got with the wrong individual. Now, we could go down the road of, why did I get with the wrong individual? Well, that's where all the work happens right there.
Sure.
But that's really difficult stuff. It's not necessarily needs to be addressed right at this moment. Separate yourself from what is a very toxic, unhealthy situation for some of you guys, not all you guys, for some of you guys.
Yeah.
And then you can start doing the work of healing and recovery, and then the hard work of, what got me in this mess in the first place? Why was I
Hmm.
attracted to this type of person? Why were they attracted to me? And why did I insist on hanging on when everything around me was saying, "Run for your life, dude. This is bad."
Right.
That's the tough stuff. But
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think, again, going back to the importance of men's groups, having that tribe around you. Sometimes that tribe says, "Dude, you got a good woman on your hands.
Right.
She's a good woman and she's really trying. She's given everything she has. You need to be more patient with this woman. She's 52 years old and menopausal. Of course, she's not going to have the libido that she used to have before. She's been through a trauma, breast cancer. What you need to be more patient with this woman. You need the tribe
Hmm.
around you to kind of screw your head on straight sometimes, or sometimes you need that tribe around you to say, this is not good, dude. This is not going to end
Yes.
well. You need to get out of this. This is nuts. And so it's a delicate balancing game, isn't it? Of
Yes.
where am I being this codependent Mr. Nice Guy type, and where am I? Where do I need to yank my head out of my butt and be a better husband? And it takes help to get there, to get into that mindset. And some of us continue to work on that day after day for the rest of our lives.
I mean, I think that what you're speaking to is like it's a gold medal statement, right? Like in terms of like really, really, again, just supporting that man to really be clear about where his work is, so his side, really cleaning up his side of the street, but also like, you know, having that love and I can't even necessarily think of the words, but just like that ownership of like that they matter too. It's so beautiful how you spoke to it. And so now let's say a man is in some sort of a toxic, I don't know, even not even a toxic, like let's not go down that route. Let's just say that there are some issues with their woman or even in their relationship. I think that one of the things that I see is that let's say so the man, is sort of going to the wife and saying like, "Hey, we've got some work to do." And, I imagine in most scenarios, that initial conversation is going to be like, yeah, we're going to do this work, we're going to shift things around, but then human behavior starts to set back in,
Mm.
and people start to kind of go back to their potentially go back to how things have been. So how can we support men to really like be able to see like, yes, things are going in a direction that I want to, or no, they're not necessarily going in the direction that I want to. So now I need to like make a decision. Like, how do we support that process as like, let's say,
Oh,
coaches?
that's tough, isn't it? And there's a lot of things that make that way more difficult. You have things like religion. You have things like a lot of moral obligations and things that men have, depending on their culture and where they come from in the world and their background. That's very different. I have some men that come from Orthodox Jewish,
Right,
Orthodox Muslim, and faiths and so forth that say this divorce thing is off the table. And it's like,
right,
okay, well, that does make things a little bit more difficult because there's no right turn. You only have the left turn. Okay, let's make do with what we can here, and and then in day and age, it overcomplicates it further with things such as your very progressive things such as open marriages and all this other stuff that just like way overcomplicates stuff. So it's difficult. And how do we better support these guys in making that decision, knowing full well that they may have these limitations and that limitation, they have this background, that background. It's just basically men tend to respond well to no BS kind of get to the point kind of stuff.
mm-hmm,
And I have had, it's been thankfully, knock on wood, very few men, but I have had the conversations with men where I have said, man to man, if you stay in this relationship, one or both of you are going to be dead, like literally dead. It's that bad. You need to
mm-hmm,
get out. This is very unhealthy. Save your children, get the law involved, et cetera, et cetera. And some of those men, hang their head and be like, usually when I say something to that effect, they will say, yeah, my sister said the same thing, or my
right,
uncle said the same thing. I'm not the first person to say something like that. So you just reinforce your value. You you have value. You're in real danger. Get the hell out. All the way to yeah, yank your hat out of your butt. You're in a good relationship. You need to do better. You can work harder. It all boils down to for a lot of these men. And raising my hand, I was one of them. We didn't necessarily have the best background.
mm-hmm,
As children, we sat back and we had a front row seat for let's see how mom and dad interact with each other and our extended family and so forth. And some of us come from a lot of dysfunction.
mm-hmm,
So we are learning as we go, aren't we? And
yeah,
as a 40, 50, 30, 40, 50 some year old guy, learning as you go is a lot tougher for us than
yeah,
it is for, adolescent teenager that's learning as they go. But that's the cards we've been dealt. And
mm-hmm,
so, guys watching this, watching your information, watching mine and stuff, you know, be secure in knowing that you are of tippy top of the hierarchy of guys period, guys that are trying to do
yes,
better. Because most people just live their day-to-day life and just like, oh well, it is what it is,
yes,
and they just let the life wash over them, and then they die, and it's oh well. Well, we're saying no, I'm going to learn.
yeah,
What a interesting concept that we never stop learning this kind of stuff. But it can also take a left turn in the conversation. It can also go a little bit too much. We have a lot of anxious guys that ingest and take in and never stop taking in information, and they
Yes.
don't necessarily use it.
Yes.
It's very important that you're going to get a lot of advice from your tribe, your group, your book, your YouTube video, your course, your whatever boot camp that you go to and stuff, but you got to put it into practice and you got to use it at some point. Otherwise, it's all just fruitless.
Yeah. Well, and it's I really love what you're speaking to as well, because like what I also hear in it is like it's a really being a stand for like the best relationship possible, right? That two people are in a thriving relationship, with kids, whatever you want to call it. And like that's really the intention. And so from kind of what you're speaking to of like as a man really owning, it's like we deserve that. We deserve to have a thriving relationship. And so if that's the bar, what actually gets created from that place, right? And again, it's like it doesn't have to be judgmental or guilt ridden. It's like, no, this is what we're actually playing for in the relationship. Do you want to play for that or not, kind of thing, and setting
Mhm.
that as the standard. So awesome that you spoke to it. So a question that one of the men asked me, and I love this question because you kind of you spoke to it in the book, and so his question was, um, basically like, how do I navigate vulnerable topics with my wife or partner? So say I have shame or fear or just stuff around intimacy that I'm worried about. Like, can I bring those up in a marriage?
Mm.
Or like how can I actually, you know, get supported in this, and not send my wife off in the other direction or
Yeah.
have her like, that type of thing. So like what's your thoughts on that? Like what have
Well,
you noticed?
context is everything. So coming from let's take two opposite ends of the extreme here. Your alpha male, super avoidant, doesn't show any emotion, tough guy type of guy. Former Navy SEAL, you know, that type of dude. If he comes to his wife and says, I want to talk to you about something. I've been feeling a little down lately, yada, yada, yada. She's
Mm,
just going to be like, he opened up to me.
yes.
Hallelujah. She's just going to shed tears of joy. This is what I want. I've been wanting this kind of vulnerability and openness from my man forever. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Versus probably the majority of guys watching this and
Of
look at my material are of the opposite end of the spectrum. Not saying they are less than manly, not saying they're
course.
whatever, feminine in nature, but they are probably more open and anxious in nature. They're not one to shy away from showing emotion. They're not one to shy away from talking a lot about everything.
Hmm.
And so for that guy, who is usually paired up with, unfortunately, kind of an avoidant gal, um, for him to once again come to her and go, I have something I need to talk about. A lot of these women are internally going, oh God, here we go again.
Right.
Yeah, what is it? Go ahead. That's the energy that they have. It's
Yes.
just like, here we go again. Yet another thing. Um, and those avoidant women, it's often that we demonize the avoidant person, us anxious
Hmm.
people, as they're so cold, they're so lifeless, they're teetering on narcissistic in nature and so forth. No, that's not necessarily fair. It's the way they're wired, much like we are wired in a dysfunctional way, if you will, in an insecure way is a better way of putting it. And much like us anxious people, the avoidant people have a point. You don't need to discuss every little thing. You don't
Yes.
need to emote constantly about everything. You don't need to run to your spouse to say, I feel bad. Can you heal my boo boo?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, the super avoidant guys, of which when you talk about those avoidant types, we're talking about attachment style, they tend to be men usually. But all of us anxious guys, we do a good job of finding all the women too. Um, but they have a point with their stoicism, but they take it too far.
Yes.
They take it too far in terms of they're not loving creatures. They're not open. They're very wooden, and they're not warm and they're not welcoming. Again, we always come back to that middle gray area is
Of
the
course.
healthy spot. So I would say for men, maybe really take inventory of yourself when you're sitting here going, I really want to share this thing with my spouse.
Yeah.
Why? What's the thing? What's going on, dude? Why do you want to share it so much with your wife? Take a time out. Are you looking to your wife to fulfill some kind of missing maternal role in your life? You know, men say it's unfair that my wife gets to come to me and literally cry about something that happened at work, but I can't do the same.
Hmm.
And I always kind of furrow my brow and say, why exactly do you want to do the same?
Hmm.
Is that necessarily a good thing?
Mm.
Well, no, but I would like to know that I should be able to do that without harm, without, fear of her leaving me or whatever. Oh, you can. If you're having a genuinely acute emotional moment and you're a human being, let it out, dude. Sure.
Yeah.
Well, but she may leave me or she may think less of me as a result of it. That's kind of on her, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the super secure men, they say that I've had a bad day. It is what it is. They dry themselves off and they go like, let's go get some pizza, you know?
Right.
And like they realize I'm a human being. It is what it is. Oh, wife is a little funny towards me for a little bit. That's fine. What's the big deal? Yeah.
Yeah.
I repeatedly do that on a daily basis and overwhelm my partner to the point where they feel like my therapist. Yeah, you've gone too far. But
Right.
again, it's the delicate balancing act.
Of
And it's a
course.
little bit more difficult for us anxious guys to define where the heck that line is. I try to illustrate it with little stories here and there. Men respond well to little stories that they can relate to. An example of being stoic to a fault is you're meeting a gal for the first time, you're sitting down for dinner, and you mention something in passing, and she's like, "Wait a minute, what was that? Something about an accident?" And you go, "Oh yeah, I was in a car
Mm.
accident when I was a kid. My mom and dad died." Is yeah. And
Right.
she's like,
Yeah.
"Wait, what?
Yeah.
How old were you?" I was like 9. Holy crap, that must have been really awful for you. I can't imagine. He's just like, what is what is. People die anyway. Let's order food. That's weirdly,
Yes.
he's really holding back. The extreme is tell me about the accident, and the guy's like, I can't, and he starts crying and he's bawling and he's making a scene and people are looking at him. She's like, okay, this is a little weird. This is all right. He obviously hasn't gotten over this. How long ago was this? 30 years ago. Okay, yeah, that's a little odd. He's over emotional. He can't contain himself. This is not something I'm attracted to. This is a person who's out of control. The middle ground. What's the healthy example in that? Oh yeah, it was terrible. I went through a hell of a time when I was a kid. I had to go
Yeah.
through therapy. I still think of my mom every single day, after the accident. It was awful, but I've learned to appreciate life after that. It can all go away like this. So I tend to be really attached to people, maybe a little bit too much, and but yeah, that's really shaped a lot of my life. That moment. That's vulnerable, open. And what if she goes, ugh, I don't like this. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's her problem, So what? She's just a gal that I just met. It's not a big deal. So really, we keep circling back to it's really all about the security and shame that a man has for some very genuine, real feelings, but at the same
Mhm.
time, don't want to go overboard, don't want to hold back too much. It's that delicate balancing game.
Absolutely, and I there's sort of two things that I'll speak to. One is like sort of you got to calibrate, and I can think of like with my wife, for example, this is my first year of being full time as a business owner. I've done it part time for the last 4 years. This year's first year full time, and so obviously we're having conversations about money, what's coming in, what's been happening, and like one of the things that I noticed is that yes, it's a great like we are in conversation about it. We're keeping each other up to date. But what I started to notice, for example, was like, let's say, just for example, she'll do this every once in a while. She'll ask like, "Hey, how did today go? How did today go?" And what I started to notice was like, oh, that my how I'm responding is actually it's almost like she's inquiring, or it's creating nervousness in that sense. Like if we're having this conversation on a daily basis or that type of thing, like it's creating nervousness where nervousness really doesn't need to be.
Mm,
So where that sort of brought me back to is like, again, I can share with my wife what's happening in my business. And, generally I'll speak with her about it, a couple of times a month. But there's a difference in having that conversation a couple of times a month and sharing the big picture about what's going on versus like, hey, today went well, today didn't go well. And then now she's in it with me. She's having to experience it with me. And I think it's that same dynamic where it's like, if your wife or partner is like having to face the stuff that you're facing on a daily basis, there's going to be an impact of that too.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And some people take that negatively to hear that. That I should be able to go too far with some of this. And I say to guys, if that's your thinking that yes, you should be able to moat to your wife day and night all day long and have zero repercussion and she should your love should supersede any kind of judgment that comes as a result of that. I'm like, that's not realistic and it's not healthy. That's you need
Yeah.
to relook at how you're viewing this whole relationship thing.
Absolutely. And a great opportunity to look getting support structures outside of your wife or partner, right? The men's group, other men,
Yes.
because that's where you can take that stuff. Some of the
Mhm.
if you're wanting to get support and have those sort of, daily conversations, you want to have multiple avenues, not just having your wife be the resource for all these things.
Because and I think this is especially true for the gals in our life. They will feel that pressure, that weight on their shoulders if they are your number one and only source for outlet for this kind of stuff. It's a burden on them, and they will
Yeah,
feel that burden and they will resent you for it. And rightfully so, because you're supposed to have other avenues for getting this stuff out. Friends, family, whatever.
absolutely. So I want to shift us for the last part of our conversation to talking about some stuff around intimacy and sex. Um, and so I'll start with one of the questions that a man in one of the groups I have asked was, we'll start from here. I struggle with initiating sex with my woman. And so, what are some ways that I can look at initiating with her when it comes to like, just intimacy and sex? What are some of the things that you would kind of say to a man?
Well, I would first say, what's your hang up? Like, tell me
Mm,
what's going on. Because often for a lot of those guys, it is because I've been shot down before and I have a really severe reaction to being rejected. It makes me feel like total garbage and it brings in a lot of anxiety and I don't want to go there.
hmm
So, and the last 2 times I tried anything, she said, I'm sorry, I'm not feeling it. And that made me feel like complete dirt and I don't want to go there. So, can you give me the formula for to do that so I can avoid any potential rejection? No, that doesn't exist.
hmm
She's a human being. She may have bad stomach cramps. She may just not be feeling it. She may have had a bad stressful day. Um, welcome to being married to a female. They tend to have more to use. There was an author by the name of Emily Nagoski who wrote "Come as You Are," book about women and sexuality.
hmm
So women tend to have a lot of what we call breaks. So you have the accelerator and the brake. Women have more breaks than we do. Bad day at work, kids sick, yada yada yada. Men tend to be like, screw all those breaks. I'm good, whatever. Man has a horrible day at the office and he comes home and he's shaking because the boss says I'm gonna have to lay you off. Wife says you want to go upstairs and do it. He'd be like, yeah, sure. Women aren't necessarily wired in that way.
hmm
So um, you're much more apt to be rejected. I think any therapist would tell you the same thing. They hear that a lot from men. You're gonna have to get over yourself. Um, Now, with that being said, a lot of the time I tell men, I wish I was a fly on the wall so I
mm,
could watch your interaction with the wife and I could say,
yes.
yeah, buddy, that was not smooth, my man. That was very awkward. That was very robotic. That was just came out of nowhere.
Mm,
I think the come out of nowhere is the thing that hurts a lot of men because we're ready like that. While to the woman, she's like, this guy has done nothing all day long, maybe all week long or whatever, to connect with me. Um, Something that my wife and I are good at is the flirtation, the mating, courting dance, whatever you call it, begins very early in the day. And I don't
hmm
mean going doing anything sexual. I mean just the little touches, the little kisses,
mm,
the little pardon me, I got a cold. The little you look really cute in that outfit today. The little oh, I like your eyes. Is that makeup new? Oh, these are all just little minute things throughout the day. They're not calculated. They're not me,
mm.
I'm not making a checklist in my head going, okay, that's 6 compliments today. Now, no, it
Yes.
just naturally happens throughout the day. That's just what we are. That's the culture of our relationship. And so the end result of the day, when all is said and done and we're alone with each other and the kids to bed and everything else, that's a natural progression of the day as well. Obviously, we're going to take advantage of this alone time and continue what we've been doing all the rest of the day. So it doesn't become a formal Ralph is initiating thing. as I tell most men, it just kind of happens.
Right.
Now, have there been moments where I have started escalating and obviously taking it to the more intimate sexual level, and she's just like, I'm not feeling it, whatever? Sure. I think what helps soften the blow is that the culture of our relationship for all these years has been one of a lot of closeness, sexuality, intimacy, and so forth. So that when I get I'm not feeling it right now, that is absolutely positively A-okay, not a big deal. Well, of course, you got diarrhea, whatever it may be,
Hmm.
of course you're not feeling so good. Um, so I can see where it's easy for me to say, right? As opposed
Right.
to this guy who hasn't had any for 6 months.
Right.
And he's like, here we go. I'm going to make a move. And he does. And she literally slaps him and says, what are you doing? And he comes back to me and goes, obviously, this is why I'm, averse to initiating. It's like, yeah, I know. Um, you have a lot of work to do if this is at all possible to turn this around. But you're going to have to realize at some point you're going to have to get over that fear and realize that, yeah, making a move is how this is all going to happen. If it happens, it's got to happen with you making a move. You can't just sit back with your arms crossed and say,
Yes.
I'll just wait for her to do something. Yeah, good luck.
Yes.
Hold your breath. Yeah, I wouldn't. So
He'll be waiting a while.
it's probably not going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think like one of the things that's so awesome that you spoke to is like, and you're right, right? Because the way that you are is it's authentic when it comes to the creation of like we'll call it intimacy or playfulness. Like that's a part of the relationship that the two of you have, which might not be the case for other guys who, are like you said, maybe they haven't had sex in 6 months and maybe they're not as like attuned to, you know, doing these things, right? In that sense where I want to come back to though is really highlighting that piece that you spoke to. This is not a calculated approach. This is not, 5 steps to, getting your wife in the bedroom. It's really just coming from that authentic place. And so, and this is one that's even present for me as well, let's 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 say well just one of the things that's there is like what are some ways that I can start to explore, let's say, creating that deeper intimacy, sexuality, um, just even like,
Connectedness.
yeah, connectedness, and even like exploring like, hey, what might my partner actually like when it comes to intimacy? Because I think one of the things that you highlight in the book so well is that even in marriage and relationship, it can start to kind of become robotic. And
Mm.
then and routine in that sense. So how can we start to sort of unlock those sort of deeper layers of intimacy as a
What a
partnership?
good question. Well, but you're tapping into something which is a lot of people see as kind of a nefarious thing, which is when you're in a long-term monogamous relationship with somebody, it tends to get stale in that way. And
Hmm.
that is if you just allow the mechanism of our natural human nature to take over. Because
Yes,
Mother Nature is basically, and how I've kind of framed it, is that it's said, okay, you two have made children. Your job's done here. Like, beat it. And
absolutely.
everything in her soul, if you will, or in her body and brain is saying, like, what is he doing here again? Shouldn't he be kind of beat it, dude? And everything in your brain is like, that woman over there looks pretty nice, and that one looks pretty nice. And pornography and so forth kind of preys upon that inclination that we have.
Hmm.
So it takes effort to pull you back together. So for a guy or gal to say, I just ain't feeling it anymore, man. I don't say, yeah, of course you don't. Duh.
Hmm.
You're supposed to work at this. So what does that work look like to reconnect you to? No, it doesn't mean jump into bed. That doesn't mean get your wife on testosterone therapy so it will raise her, libido artificially, if you will. It means those little connection moments. It means, yeah, a lot of the time, dude, you're going to have to be the one to drive the ship when it comes to that reconnection, those tasks to reconnect, simply because Mrs. Wife, oftentimes, not always, oftentimes is way overwhelmed. Kids, job, house, blah, blah, blah. It's too much in her head. And unfortunately, dude, if you're a married guy with kids, listen to this. You're way down at the bottom, mixed in on the list of shit she's worried about. You
Right.
used to be way at the tippy top.
Of
Not
course.
so much anymore. So it may not be for a lot of you guys at the tippy top of her mind. Carve out time for a husband to raise intimacy level, blah, blah, blah. So you're going to have to drive that ship. Sorry, dude.
Hmm.
And that may mean, wife, Wednesday, I'm going to drive by your office and pick you up for lunch. What? I didn't. Yep, it's done. Where are we gonna go? Yeah, you'll find out. Those just little spontaneous, fun moments. You
Hmm.
you tapped into it. If you remember, a few minutes ago, you said playfulness in the relationship. I can't tell you how many people just have no fun with each other. There's no
Hmm.
playfulness. There's no like little jokes between each other or no little whatever. Have fun, And I know it's hard if some of you guys have been like in a sexless marriage for so long. That's the last thing you want to do. Some of you guys have gotten to the point where you flat out do not like your spouse anymore. That's a whole other issue. If you don't like them, then what are you doing trying to have sex with them? But anyway, so the playfulness, the connection, I'm gonna pick you up for lunch, we're gonna go do this thing. And maybe sometimes that means kind of pushing the envelope of the sexy thing a little bit. That's kind of a
Hmm.
level 2, 3, 4 thing, but it's something that a lot of people are kind of, especially more religious conservative types are like, oh, I don't know about that. But it may be she puts on the slinky little dress that barely covers anything, and you guys go out dancing, maybe that kind of thing.
Hmm.
If you're really kind of out there in that department, it may be like strip clubs or things like that. That's kind of an overtly sexual, whoa, out there thing for a lot of people, but that takes your connection in the sexy realm to the next level. Basically, what we're all doing is kind of trying to fool the system, is what I call it. So
Hmm.
the natural system we have in place of you guys are supposed to split up and go your separate ways and find new mates. Well, we're fighting against that, and we're reintroducing some of that new positive emotional tension, that healthy anxiety, that good stuff that kind of kept us glued together in the first place. Let's reintroduce some of that. Easier said than done for a lot of people. Sometimes you have a partner that's like that part of our life is over, dude. You'll get your once a month, and you'll pity sex or whatever, and you'll be happy. We have 3 kids. We each work full time. We have this house project, this other thing, Disney World coming up next month. I have no time to be Miss Sexy, go on lunch with my husband, dates, and all this other stuff. I understand. It's tough. It sucks, but it is what it is. That's your relationship. No matter how much you push and pull, they don't come along for the ride. That's where it's that difficult decision time, unfortunately, for some people. Is this what I want to go with for the rest of my life or not? There's a lot of
Yeah.
people that are like, yeah, it's fine. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Some people are like, no, this is hell. I can't live like this anymore. So, but
Hmm.
regardless,
Hmm.
if you want to improve things, to all my dudes out there, you have to be the one driving. Now, as far your question in terms of once you're in the bed, what to do in bed, what do you like? A lot of that comes, especially as we get older, after so many years together, real overt communication. Grabbing hand and go, not there, here. Oh,
Right.
okay, cool. Yeah, all right, fine. You got to set your ego aside. You're not
Yeah.
Mr. Casanova lover. You've been with this woman for 24 years. It's a little different now than what it used to be. Listen to each other. I like this. I don't like that. And what goes along with that, not so much the technical hows and do's, step 1, 2, insert tab A, slot B kind of thing, but it also is don't shame your partner when she potentially comes to you with something that's a little out there.
Mm.
You might be like, oh, didn't see this coming. Okay. Oh, all right. Some men, their ego takes a big hit when woman
Right.
comes to you and says, I have fantasies about fill in the blank. That doesn't necessarily mean it needs to become reality. She's just being very open and vulnerable with you. But here's what kind of turns me on. And you might be
Yeah.
like, cool, awesome. I have my own little things. Here's one of mine. Cool. That may introduce and raise the levels of connectedness and whatever in the relationship. A lot of people have a lot of problems with that, especially if your spouse comes to you with, I have fantasies of, a lot of men hear this from their women, other women. I have
Hmm.
fantasies about other women and stuff. Holy shit, my wife's gay. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. Dude, she's a human being. People,
Yes.
sexuality is fluid, especially for our lady friends. Just roll with it. It doesn't mean you're going to introduce other people into the bedroom. It just she's sharing something with you. She's being open and vulnerable. She needs to know that she's safe to say this kind of stuff, and that safety helps bring the two of you closer together for sure.
No, it's so great. And I again, kind of staying with that playfulness theme. I mean, I know one of the authors that you speak to in your book is Esther Perel.
Mhm.
Are there any other, who, again, even if you go get the book that she wrote, it's a great book, but are there any other just like resources out there that you see for men that can help them sort of cultivate that playfulness, or even just show up more freely in the bedroom? Just anything that you've come across?
There is There's a lot of material that is out there that is more progressive in nature when it comes to female sexuality. Is not liked by a lot of men. A lot of Esther Perel stuff. A lot of more conservative men are like, I this is kind of out there. I don't like it.
Mhm.
Simply
Mhm.
because a lot of it is it points out the fact that for a lot of women, not all women, I always have to preface that saying not all women, ladies, but for a lot of women, dare I say the majority of them, when they enter into a safe relationship long term with one guy, he could look like a Greek god. He could do every chore there is in the world. He could be the greatest father on the planet. He could be a billionaire. Libido for a woman when they first meet is here. After 5 years, after 10 years, after whatever,
Yes.
while he is still just coasting along up here going, what the hell happened? That's a
Mhm.
very natural, normal thing. There are authors such as Esther Perel, such as Wednesday Martin is another one. I believe she's Dr. Wednesday Martin, PhD, who have pointed out, us women tend to not get super turned on about that strict monogamy thing. And some of us are pretty open about that. And we do the whole open thing. We do the whole serial monogamy thing. We jump from man to man to man to man.
Mm.
That seems to be the key to getting our libido way up there.
Of
And some
course.
people hear that and go, that's not, I don't know. I don't like that. Well,
Mhm.
my take on that is doesn't necessarily mean jump into the open relationship thing. That comes with a lot of chaos and a lot of
Yes.
not so good drama. Don't necessarily jump into the divorce start over. Jokes, divorce start over also leads to a lot of chaos, broken homes, and everything else. But what can we learn from those people? What little nugget of info can I take from them and from them that I can apply to my strict monogamous relationship that may help
Mhm.
keep things going, keep the spark alive? That's where I think we can learn from a lot of those folks. So I say that by you may crack open a book by Esther Perel and go, dude, no. Don't necessarily throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's
Sure.
something to learn from all these folks. Wednesday, Martin, our pal, Dr. Psych Mom, Dr. Samantha Rodman
Yep.
Whiten, Esther Perel, Helen Fisher's an anthropologist that writes on. So all these are women, if you notice.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, David Buss, he's a Mr. He's big into the world of evolutionary psychology. Huge name. He's been on the Joe Rogan. He's written tons of books. So all kinds of resources out there, YouTube
Yeah.
channels, and here's something that we lose sight of, though, is uh, find super happy, sexy, connected couples and find out what they do.
Yes.
Hang out with them.
Yeah.
Enjoy their company. What a crazy idea. Just be around them and see what it is that they do and how they interact with each other. Hang out. And that's
Totally.
your new couple friend. Yeah, we're going to hang out with them. They're fun to be around.
Yeah.
There's a novel idea.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing, some of those folks. And I love that you spoke to that, right? That, yeah, it can be easy to, sort of take a look at somebody's work and like, no, this is not for me. But really just, yeah, even if you can take one concept, one thing from it and just practice with it, bring it into the relationship. You don't have to read the whole book, that type of thing. So this
Hmm.
has been awesome, Ralph. I really,
Yeah,
really just, I love the conversation. I really appreciate you just sharing your wisdom. And there's more that I want to acknowledge you for. But is there anything that, well, actually, we'll go from here. Is there anything else you'd want to just share in closing? Like anything else that's just present for you, or anything you'd want to share with
I would
with people?
say check out, there's two avenues to see my material for now, more coming, but one is the old Dad Starting Over is still going. I'm still pumping out content under that brand, under that name. YouTube channel is growing. Check it out. Dad Starting Over on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, X, whatever it's called now, Instagram. We are starting to put out content under Help for Men.
Yep.
There's a Help for Men YouTube channel. We did an interview with Dr. Orion Taraban that's done very, very well. And more interviews to come there. So check out helpformen.com and check out our private men's group called the HFM Brotherhood, which is growing and growing every day. We're up to, it's done one of these as most things do, but right now we're hitting at around one new member a day, which we love. So
Excellent.
that's a good thing. We'll take it.
Yeah.
And so that's, again, HFM Brotherhood. You can learn more at helpformen.com.
Absolutely, yeah, and I'll just share that I signed up for the lifetime membership,
Thank
in
you.
the group because one, it's a smoking deal, for that, and the other thing that I'll speak to is that well, one, you get to be in the wisdom of Ralph, the other coaches, and it's a really awesome community. It's really engaged, lots of support there as well, and there's just so again, if you just think of it like the Dead Bedroom Fix is such an amazing resource, and then you get to come into a community like that. It's like it's such an awesome thing. So I'll make sure to provide the links for that. If anybody has any questions about my experience in the group as well, I'm happy to share.
Thank you
And
so much.
just
Appreciate it.
awesome, awesome, Ralph. I really appreciate you taking the time today. May I give you some acknowledgement to wrap up this conversation for today?
Give me some acknowledgement to wrap up the conversation. What do you
Yeah.
mean?
Sure. So one of the practices that I have in coaching is just really acknowledging the person for who they're being
Oh,
in the
okay.
world. And so, yeah, I really just I know like this is our first time of getting to interact together, but I really just acknowledge you for your authenticity. I mean, I think that like the one thing that really shines through is like you're a powerful man. You really are intentional about the life that you've created, and it really shows in how you show up and the resources that you create and who you're being. But I also just acknowledge you for your wisdom. You're able to, take different elements of learnings and really create them in a way that is it's really like it's applicable. Like I can share from my experience that like when I listen to your audiobook, it connects because you know I can see the opportunities of where I can grow, but at the same time I also see the opportunities of like where I can show up better in the world as well, or how I can show up better in my marriage, or maybe where I haven't been showing up. And I think it's like you're the gateway to that, and just who you're being. It's like that humility and that authenticity, it creates that for all of us. And so just thank you for all that you're doing. It's really magical work, and I just think we're all blessed to be a part of it.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. You just made my day. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, guys. If you have any questions at all after you've watched the interview, please feel free to share. Make sure to check out Help for Men because it's an amazing resource. And we will end here for today.
All
Thanks
right.
again, guys.
Thank you, brother.
Absolutely. Here we go.